Hello, everyone. I hope everyone is doing good, and welcome to the fifth episode of Kids Corner. And as usual, Kids Corner is something where if you have a question, you can give it to your parents. Your parents will give me the question, and I'll put in something like this bowl here, and I will answer your question. So, episode five, the fourth episode with Eric asking a question. Episode five, we have two questions, and these two questions come from Kristen. Kristen, so thank you so much for sending your questions. First question is, how did God create the mind of a human? Wow, that's actually a really big question. Okay, now from my understanding, the Bible doesn't tell us exactly how He made the mind, but there is something that I can share with you of how God actually created us in general. Okay, and this something it will tell you how special each person is. There are so many passages that talk about the creation of the person. Let me give you an example in the Old Testament, in Psalm chapter 139, verse, let's see, it looks like it's 13 to 16. David or King David is having a conversation with God. In this passage, David says something very interesting. Pretty much what he says is, "You made my every part, and when I, David saying to himself, when he was still in his mother's womb, God created him. So even before when you were still in your mother's womb, Kristen, okay, God was already making decisions on what you would look like, how many little hairs. Have you ever thought about taking one strand of hair? Do you know how many pieces of hair you have? It's a lot. Literally every strand of hair, God decided what you will look like. Blue eyes, green eyes, brown eyes, short, tall, male, female, girl, boy. What's your personality like? Are you a person who maybe likes to play music? Do you like to play sports? There's so many aspects of who we are, and God was the one who created us. Okay? Now, one really cool thing I'm gonna share that's something even more exciting. I just shared with you, and I said God created us when He was in our mother's tummy, essentially. But there is another passage in the Old Testament, Jeremiah. Jeremiah is a prophet that God chose, okay? In the first chapter, when he was scared to be chosen to be a prophet, God said, I chose you before you were even born. So if you think it's crazy that God decided how you were going to be made in your mother's womb, in Jeremiah, it's saying, Jeremiah is an example where he was chosen before he was even born. Isn't that crazy that a person could be chosen for something, to do something, to do what? To do something very cool in their future? Is it to become a police officer, a fireman, a doctor, a lawyer? I'm a pastor. Is it possible maybe he chose me even before I was born? This shows us how special each of us are, because he didn't just create us and saying, you know what, I'm not going to spend a lot of time thinking about how I'm going to create you. But from the two passages I read us, not only was he thinking about this before or during in your mother's tummy, but there's a good chance before you were even born, he was thinking about you, thinking about what you would do in the future. That's crazy. All right, Kristen, now we're going to answer your last question, which is, why did God create the angels? That's another good question, Kristen. Why did God create the angels? God created the angels for a lot of different things. The simple answer is the angels are God's servants. So if you're a servant, whatever your master asks you to do, you're going to do it. Whatever God asks the angels to do, they'll do it. Let me give you an example, okay? If you remember the story when Jesus was born, right? In the example of the New Testament in Luke chapter 2, verses 8, I guess is 8 to 20. There was one moment, you probably remember this. You remember the moment when the shepherds were in their field and then they're watching the flock. All of a sudden, an angel of the Lord appeared to them and they were very scared. But the angel, what did the angel say? They said, "Don't be afraid. I will bring you good news." And the angel was telling them the Messiah, Jesus, being born. So, in that one moment, the angel's job was to tell them good news. But there's a lot of different things that God will ask angels to do, okay? So, again, why did God create angels? Because the angels were to be God's servant. Now, one thing to keep in mind is why God, to remember is God is all powerful. Technically speaking, he doesn't need the angels. Okay, God's not lazy and he's not sitting there and he's saying, "Angels, do whatever I want you. Give me a cup of tea. Give me a bag of popcorn." Right? He's not lazy. He's not powerless. He's still powerful. Okay, so we just know why God chose the angels to serve him. But we also know that God's very powerful. It's not because he needed the angels and he's weak. Okay? Okay, Kristen, so hopefully I answered your question. Thank you to both Eric and Kristen for sending your questions. And feel free, this is to all the parents, all the kids, also to all the parents too. If you ever have any questions about the Bible too, feel free to send them in too as well. Thank you everyone and hope you have a good day.